There's a curious thing that happens when you're walking the path your soul was meant to walk. It's not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or flashing signs from the sky. It's far more subtle, more intimate than that. It's a kind of peace, a quiet knowing deep in your bones that whispers, this is right. And the strangest part is, it often doesn't make any logical sense. Everything around you might still be uncertain. The bills aren't all paid. Relationships may still feel unresolved. You might not know exactly where you're going. But within you, there's this stillness, a sense of alignment that no amount of chaos on the outside can shake. It doesn't mean your life is perfect. It means your spirit is no longer at war with itself. That's a sign. A very loud one in a very quiet way. You see, most people think peace is something you find when everything settles down, when the job comes through, when the relationship stabilizes, when the future is all mapped out. But peace, true peace, doesn't wait for conditions to be met. It precedes them. It's not something earned by fixing the world around you. It's something received by aligning with the world within you. And this inner peace isn't passive. It doesn't just sit there like some decorative rock in your spiritual garden. It actually begins to guide you. You start making decisions not out of fear or pressure, but out of clarity. You don't rush to prove anything. You don't chase after every opportunity. You just walk confidently, humbly, with that inner sense as your compass, and even when others don't understand it, you do. You may not be able to explain why you're turning down a perfectly good offer or walking away from something everyone else would cling to, but you know it's right, because that quiet peace hasn't left you. Now it's easy to dismiss this feeling. The mind, clever as it is, will try to override it. It will say, this doesn't make sense. You should be panicking. You should be working harder. You should be worried by now. But the soul doesn't deal in the shoulds. It knows when it's aligned. And when it is, it no longer needs to shout. It rests. That's the paradox. The more aligned you are with the path meant for you, the less you need to push. Not because the path is without effort, but because the effort finally flows in the right direction. Like swimming downstream instead of up. You still move, you still work, but you're no longer fighting against the current of your own life. And you can feel that. You don't need anyone to tell you, you just know. There's a sacredness to that inner knowing. It's not emotional high, not euphoria, not excitement, it's deeper. It's a calm trust in the process, in the unfolding. You stop obsessing over whether every step is perfect because you've come to realize that even a misstep on the right path teaches you something vital. There's less fear of falling because you're no longer trying to walk someone else's tightrope. And what's beautiful is that this peace begins to infect everything else. It spills over into your conversations, your work, your thoughts. You carry it like a lantern, and others can feel it too, even if they don't know what to call. It's the kind of presence that doesn't preach, but quietly reminds others that there's a different way to live. So if you find yourself in a season of not having all the answers, not seeing the full picture, but you do feel that inexplicable peace underneath it all, don't ignore it. That is not apathy. That is not delusion. That is not you giving up. That is you tuning in. And the more you listen to it, the clearer everything else becomes. Because the path doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself in rhythm with your trust. And in the end, peace isn't the destination. It's the evidence you are already home. There comes a moment on the path when you stop trying to force open doors that were never yours to begin with. You've probably been there, staring at an opportunity that looked perfect on paper, something you thought would complete the puzzle, only to have it close in your face, maybe more than once. And at first it stings, it feels like rejection, it feels like failure. You wonder what you did wrong or if you missed some critical sign along the way, but then something subtle happens. You stop panicking, you stop chasing, and instead you begin to trust the silence behind the shut door. That's a sign. When you're aligned with the path you're meant to walk, closed doors don't shake you the way they used to. They might still disappoint you for a moment because you're human, but they no longer undo you. They don't steal your sleep. You don't spiral into self-doubt or beg the universe to reconsider. You start to understand that some things are withheld not to punish you, but to protect you, or to redirect you towards something far more aligned than what you were reaching for. There's a kind of maturity in that, a spiritual settling. You realize that every door that shuts is a message, not a mistake, And instead of banging on it in desperation, you start to look around. You notice the hallway you're in, you notice the quiet, and sometimes you even start to feel grateful. Because had that door opened, you would have walked into something that wasn't built for your spirit. Maybe it would have fed your ego for a while, but it would have starved your soul. Now, this doesn't mean we stop striving or desiring, no, quite the opposite. It means we bring our desires into alignment with divine timing. We stop trying to rush the process or outwit the plan. We learn to show up fully, give our best, take the leap when it's right. But we also learn to walk away when the answer is clearly no. And we don't collapse under the weight of that. No, because we've seen enough to trust that something better, something deeper is unfolding. It's strange, isn't it? The very things we once feared, being told no, being turned down, losing opportunities, become the very moments that refine our trust. They sand down the rough edges of our need to control. They break the illusion that we are meant to pry life open with force. And slowly you become more relaxed in the face of uncertainty. Not because you know what's coming, but because you've stopped resisting what isn't. And what happens next is something beautiful. You start moving with a kind of quiet assurance. Doors open without you having to push so hard. Paths reveal themselves without you needing to chase them down. You begin to flow with life rather than wrestle with it. And in that flow, you begin to see that the timing of things has a sacred rhythm that has nothing to do with your calendar or your plans. You were never behind. You were never being punished. You were simply being positioned. You learn to bless the closed doors. You begin to say thank you, not out of passive resignation, but from a place of wisdom. You've lived long enough, tried hard enough, prayed deep enough to see that the wrong doors not opening is just as important as the right one swinging wide. So if something has recently fallen through, if a plan didn't work out, if someone walked away and yet you don't feel panic in your bones, you feel peace, maybe even a strange sense of relief, that's not weakness, that's alignment. That's you stepping into a deeper kind of trust. The kind where you no longer need everything to go your way because you've realized not everything is your way. And sometimes not getting what you want is the clearest sign you're already on the path you were born for. Have you ever noticed how sometimes, just when you're about to give up, when you're stretched thin, worn down, and standing at the edge of your limits, something arrives? Not everything you want, not all at once, but just enough, like to take the next step. Just enough encouragement to keep moving. Just enough provision to remind you that you're not walking this path alone. It doesn't come with thunder or applause. It comes quietly like a gentle hand on your back, nudging you forward. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. When you're on the right path, truly walking in step with something higher than your own will, support begins to show up in unexpected ways. It might be someone offering exactly what you needed without knowing it. A door opens that you didn't even knock on. A job you never applied for reaches out. A friend calls on the very day your heart was breaking. It's almost eerie how precisely timed these moments are. And yet, if you're paying attention, you'll realize they're not rare. They become part of the rhythm, not predictable but dependable. And here's the thing, it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A sense of peace when you should be panicking. A stranger's smile that breaks the loop of overthinking. A sudden clarity about a decision you've been wrestling with for weeks. It's as if the universe, or God, or whatever name you want to give that divine intelligence, decides to drop breadcrumbs just as you begin to wonder if you're lost. Not to lead you to comfort, but to keep you connected. Connected to the path, to yourself, and to something far greater than either. This is not about getting everything you ask for. No, that's wishful thinking. This is deeper. It's about realizing that you are seen even in your uncertainty, that your needs matter, not always your preferences, but your... And the more you surrender to that, the more you start noticing just how provided for you've been all along. Not always in the ways you expected, but always in the ways you truly needed. Now it's tempting to take credit when good things happen. It's to say, well, that worked out because I worked hard. I planned well, I deserved it. And sure, you did play a part, you showed up, you stayed open. But have you ever stopped to consider that your effort was only one piece in a much larger choreography? That maybe the timing, the connection, the moment itself wasn't something you could have orchestrated, even if you tried. There's a sacred intelligence at work, one that moves beyond logic and ahead of schedule and places people in your path. It aligns opportunities with perfect imperfection. It rearranges what you thought was random into something that in hindsight feels like design. And every time you recognize it, it humbles you a little more. You begin to walk with less fear because you've seen that the path provides, not always with luxury, but with purpose. Not always with ease, but with meaning. What changes is your posture. You stop chasing life like a hunter. You become more like a dancer, responding to the music, trusting the rhythm, letting each step be informed by the one before it. You move with less desperation and more trust. Because you've seen enough to know, when the moment calls for it, help comes. When your heart is breaking, comfort finds you. When you're lost in thought, direction returns. And you don't always have to seek it out. Sometimes it seeks you. So if you've been receiving what you need, just in time, just enough, even if it doesn't match your grand vision or your detailed plans, take heart. That's a sign. A sign that you're not just surviving, you're aligned. Because when you're on the right path, the road may be narrow, but you're never walking it alone. There's a subtle shift that happens when you begin walking the path that was always meant for you. And it's not something you broadcast. It's not loud or shown. In fact, it's almost invisible to the outside world. But inside, it's unmistakable. You stop needing applause. You stop chasing validation. You stop looking over your shoulder, wondering if others approve of your steps. Because something within you clicks into place. And for the first time, you don't need the world to say, you're doing great, in order to believe that you are. That's one of the clearest signs you're aligned with something higher than yourself. You lose the urge to constantly explain, prove, or justify your choices. You're not rude, you're not arrogant, you're just rooted. And there's a kind of quiet power in that. You begin to trust your own inner witness more than the voices that once guided you from the outside. Not because you've suddenly figured it all out, but because you've started to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Most of us at some point get caught in the game, the endless loop of comparison. Trying to impress, trying to be liked, trying to match some image of success that isn't even our own. We post, we perform, we seek the nods, the likes, the approval, thinking that if enough people believe we're on the right track, maybe we'll believe it too. But deep down, there's an emptiness in that, because it's not rooted in truth, it's rooted in performance. And no matter how convincing the act, the soul always knows when it's acting. But something begins to break down when you return to your own path. You stop performing. You begin to live, not for the applause, not for recognition, but because can't not live this way anymore. You're not seeking a spotlight, you're just following the thread of what feels real. And in doing so, you become more free. Free from the exhausting need to convince others of your worth. Free from the fear of being misunderstood. Free from the hunger to be seen. Because you realize you already are seen, just not by the crowd you used to chase. It's a strange kind of freedom. At first it might feel like loneliness. When you stop seeking validation, you might notice just how often you relied on it before. But over time, that silence fills with something far richer: integrity, alignment, the quiet joy of being at home in your own skin. And you begin to realize that the need for external validation fades when you're already standing in internal truth. What's even more beautiful is that this quiet confidence doesn't push others away. It draws the right ones in, the ones who don't need you to prove anything. The ones who resonate with who you are, not who you pretend to be. And life begins to feel less like a stage and more like a sacred walk. Now, don't get me wrong, affirmation is lovely. Encouragement is a gift, but when you're on the right path, you stop needing it. You're grateful for it, sure, but you're no longer fed by it. You've begun to draw your nourishment from a deeper well, one that doesn't run dry when the world turns quiet. And it will sometimes. There will be seasons where no one claps, no one sees, no one cheers you on, but you keep walking. Not because someone is watching, but because you are. And in that place right there, you start to feel what it's like to live in truth. Not rented truth, not borrowed convictions, but something solid, something unshakable, something eternal. That is the moment you stop chasing recognition and start embodying your purpose. And when you no longer need to be seen to believe in yourself, you've already become everything you were waiting for. It's easy to think that being on the right path means life should get easier. That if you're aligned, things should go smoothly, but it doesn't work that way. The truth is, alignment doesn't exempt you from hardship. It simply changes your relationship with it. The challenges don't vanish, but they no longer destroy you. They shape you. They refine something in you that ease never could. And that's how you begin to know you're on the right path. Not because the struggle disappears, but because it starts to transform you. You see, pain has this mysterious ability to strip away what isn't essential. It burns off the illusions, the false identities, the things we clung to out of fear. And when you're on the right path, that burning doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It starts to feel like purification. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin wondering, what is this trying to teach me? The focus shifts from survival to growth. You're no longer obsessed with escape. You're curious about evolution. And there's a moment somewhere in the middle of it all when you realize you've been changed, not in some grand overnight way, but subtly, quietly, like how a stone is shaped by water. You're not as reactive. You don't break the way you used to. You carry something softer, deeper, more resilient inside you. That's the gift hidden in the discomfort, because every challenge becomes a kind of mirror, showing you parts of yourself you never knew were there, both the wounds and the wisdom. This isn't about romanticizing struggle or pretending everything painful is somehow noble. There are wounds that ache, losses that leave silence in their wake. But even those, perhaps especially those, carry something sacred within them. When you're walking in alignment, nothing is wasted. Not the confusion, not the grief, not the moments you thought would undo you. All of it becomes part of the alchemy. And slowly, life stops happening to you and begins happening through you. And what's fascinating is the more you allow the challenges to teach you, the less threatening they become. You begin to see them as part of the curriculum. Not interruptions, but integral lessons on the path. It's like you stop seeing life as a series of obstacles to overcome and start seeing it as a dance you're learning to move with. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it hurts. But always, it's sculpting something inside you that couldn't be shaped any other way. This is where strength is born. Not the brittle kind that comes from pretending nothing can touch you, but the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from having been touched deeply and choosing not to close off. The kind of strength that isn't about pushing through everything, but about staying open in the middle of it. And once you taste that kind of strength, you begin to recognize it in others. You see it in the calm eyes of people who've walked through fire and learned how to carry water. So if you're facing something hard right now and yet somehow you feel clearer, more anchored, more awake, don't ignore that. That's not just resilience, that's realignment. That's the deeper part of you rising up, stretching out, remembering who you are beneath all the noise. And you begin to realize this challenge didn't come to defeat you, it came to reveal you. Because sometimes the most profound sign that you're on the right path is that the storms no longer knock you off course, they deepen your roots. There's something that begins to shift inside you when you're walking the path meant for you. It's subtle at first, like a quiet rearranging of your inner landscape. What you used to chase doesn't excite you the same way anymore. What once felt urgent starts to feel empty. And the things you never paid much attention to, gentleness, presence, purpose, start calling to you with a strange kind of clarity. You begin to notice that your desires are changing. Not forced, not faked, just naturally drifting towards something higher, towards something more meaningful. It's not that you stop dreaming. You still want things, you still hope. But the hunger changes. You no longer crave things just because they shine. You start hungering for what feels real, for what feeds not just your ego but your soul. You want your life to mean something beyond your name being known or your bank account being full. You want to live in a way that feels honest, whole, alive. And what's wild is that when you're on the right path, those deeper desires don't feel like some noble burden, they feel like liberation. You're not sacrificing who you are to be more spiritual. You're finally allowing who you really are to come to the surface. And the more you listen to that voice inside, the one that says, there's more than this, there's something deeper, the more magnetic your life becomes, not necessarily easier. Not always prettier, but fuller, more real, more aligned. You begin to notice your choices changing. You speak a little more slowly. You listen more deeply. You're not just trying to get ahead anymore, you're trying to move in harmony with something greater. Maybe you stop chasing every opportunity that flashes in front of you because you've realized not every opportunity is meant for your spirit. Maybe you walk away from a conversation that drains you. Maybe you say yes to something that scares you but feels right. And all of it, every yes, every no, starts to come from a place inside you that feels sacred. You stop asking, what can I get from this? And begin asking, what can I give to this? You start seeing your presence as part of something much larger. You recognize your impact, not in the grand performative sense, but in the quiet ways you show up. The words you speak, the space you hold, the energy you carry, and you begin to feel that maybe your very being is a form of offering. And here's the beautiful part. When your desires align with something higher, life starts moving differently. You no longer need to manufacture momentum. You're moved by something deeper. Call it God, call it grace, call it the current beneath all things. Whatever name you give it, it begins to guide you, not with pressure, but with peace. Not with urgency, but with presence. And the truth is, you won't always be able to explain it. People might ask why you've changed, why you're less interested in the things you used to obsess over. And you might not have a perfect answer. All you'll be able to say is something like, it just didn't feel like me anymore. And that's enough. Because that feeling, when the old life no longer fits and the new one is still forming, that's the edge of transformation. That's where real alignment lives. So if you find yourself wanting things that scare you because they're more honest, if you've begun craving peace over applause, meaning over material, depth over distraction, take that as a sign. You're not losing your ambition, you're remembering your calling. And when your desires begin to echo something eternal, that's not a coincidence. That's the sound of your soul finding its voice again. And when the soul begins to speak, the wise stop shouting and start listening.